Hey, I'm going to specifically talk to you a little bit about the frequencies that we recorded for you on this project. The first one being 396 hertz, or ut quient laxus in the Latin, which is basically an opening frequency, or it's a frequency that arrests guilt and shame and kind of brings your defenses down so that you can actually receive from God, which is amazing. When the Gregorians used to sing this frequency, you know, people come into church or wherever they congregate with all kinds of baggage and issues, and when they would begin to sing this particular frequency, you could watch their defenses drop and them open themselves up and feel comfortable coming into the presence of God. It has an effect on the body, typically in the blood, adjusting pH in the blood, the liver function, bone structure, brain, neurotransmission, kidney meridians in the body. It has a beautiful color. It's actually the darkest red, kind of a garnet color. And I think probably one of the more exciting things about this frequency when we were actually recording it was when God asks you to do something that you know you can't do, or when there's a different type of approach to a musical project, it was nice to have a frequency, unbeknownst to ourselves, that as we started recording it as the first one, all of us started to feel a lot more comfortable with being able to let God have the whole project and feel very comfortable with us not being the ones that were driving. And so yeah, 396, I would say probably, if you were going to categorize into 3 words, is freedom from guilt. The second frequency specifically is 417 hertz, or resonare fibris in the Latin, which means to resonate with all of your soul. It too is a red color, but a lighter color red, more of a fiery red color. And interesting characteristics of 417 is that it breaks negative cycles or procrastination, which I think is awesome. People that have a hard time focusing or getting things done, or I'll put that off until tomorrow, when they're subjected to this frequency over periods of time, find themselves way more productive, more creative. It's really good for sluggishness, maybe that midday slump that you have. You know, you put on 417 and maybe you won't need to eat another payday candy bar to get your energy. Specifically on a physiological, I would say probably it would affect the large intestine, enzymes, the whole digestive process, prostate and stomach, gallbladder weakness, headaches due to diet. If you're fasting and you have like a Herxheimer response, this is your frequency. Lower back problems and poor enzyme production and even metabolism. Interesting, this was the beginning of, right after the opening frequency, this would be like the second note of 6 particular solfeggi tones, not including 444, which I'll talk about in a minute. And what they found, the Gregorians found, is that this brought liberation and change when people would listen to this frequency. And as you'll find out later on, facilitated change to where the Catholic Church no longer needed their services. So very interesting frequency, 417. On the project, it will also be known as the Desert Sojourn. 444 is a frequency that's very dear to my heart and takes a bit of explanation. As you know, it will not appear in your list of the 6 solfeggi tones that I'm sure frequent the internet. The key 444 is very interesting. I had always assumed from my studies of King David that he had played in a different frequency or a different tuning than most of the other harp players of his time. There were many harp players during David's time, but David is the only one that we have any kind of history about that when he played there was a reaction to his playing, which I find really interesting. 444 hertz is exactly 4 cents above what we call the Stuttgart tuning, or our typical 440 tuning, which people use to tune their instruments to today. In a time when everybody was tuning down, David was tuning up, and there was no reason that we have for David had no previous, gift of construction that we know of, and suddenly he's building his own harps. He's using different wood that have a greater tensile strength. He's tuning up his harp to a different frequency. And what's interesting is that the first 4 frequencies that I'll mention today all live within the key of 444. When I was in Jerusalem, I was in a coffee house in Ben Yehuda Street, and there was a young man playing piano in there, and it was interesting. He was playing Christian songs that I knew from the United States, but he was playing them in this coffee house, and he kept looking at my table and laughing and smiling at me. And it was a little awkward at first until he came over to the table and introduced himself as David, which I thought was phenomenal, and began to tell me his studies of restoring all of David's psalms back to music again from ancient literature that he had collected and things that he had found even in some of the ancient excavations of Gad. And what I found that shocked me is from the notations he had, it proved point positive that David's tuning, of course, there was no absolute tuning. So I'm not saying that it was exact. I am saying, though, that it would border right around 444.4 is where David's tuning was. So 444, I call 444 the key of David because that's what his harp was tuned to, open tuning. It affects the lungs significantly. Pneumonia, blood, again, circulation, really important cellular oxygenation, which I think is really interesting, lymphatic drainage, and the spleen, which is, of course, the filter for your blood. The color of 444 is a dark orange. We're moving now, obviously, in our rainbow colors, a little bit past red now into the orange realm. 444 has become extremely important to me as a musician because all of my instruments are now tuned to 444.4. The people that I play music with have also tuned their instruments to the same. And this project that you're holding in your hand, hopefully by now, was recorded. The first 4 frequencies were all recorded out of the key of 444. So 444 to me is the linchpin of this whole project. There's a lot of talk right now about the frequency 528, and for good reason. Physicists, biologists, chemists, doctors have realized that this particular frequency, 528, when patients are subjected to it, it actually extends telomere length, which is what we call life extension, which is kind of the hot topic now in the health and wellness arena, as well as repairing broken DNA, which is, of course, the source of all disease. Extremely important, becoming quite popular. Interesting, frequency 528's Latin name is Mira Gestorum, which means the miraculous frequency. All along, there was, in the early Gregorian times of the Roman Catholic Church, most people assumed that church was always boring and that people were always falling asleep and that it was something they felt obligated to do that they really didn't enjoy, and nothing could be further from the truth. Originally, when the Gregorians would begin to sing, there's wonderful reports that people were spontaneously healed. There was great excitement. People didn't want to leave. And wouldn't that pretty much be indicative of the presence of God? When you're really in the presence of God, you don't want to leave. When you're in the presence of man, you can't wait to get out of there. So 528, all kinds of amazing things. It's called the miraculous tonic frequency. It's basically good for just about anything that ails you, but especially when it comes to your DNA. Like I said, it extends telomere length, repairs broken DNA. It's pretty much good for the entire body, and women will love this. It's great for hormone imbalance. The color, wonderful. 528, the color of it is almost a yellow-green or a chartreuse, which is the color of life. And oftentimes people say when they've been subjected to 528 that they feel like they're actually being brought back to life or revived. So 528, very, very powerful. Actually, the name for that particular frequency on your project will be 528 hertz or transformation. I want to talk to you now about a frequency 639 hertz, or in the Latin, it's famuli tuorum. It's interesting that it actually means family restoration. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, there's really a frequency that elicits reconnection. You know, in the Bible, we talk about a season where the hearts of the children will be restored to their fathers. And there's actually a frequency that they have found that literally breaks down the barriers between disgruntled behavior between families and, of course, in a larger scale, all of us as humans. 639, besides restoring relationship, is also really powerful for gallbladder, the adrenals. those weak little, those weak little organs that constantly need nurturing, the adrenals, the endocrine meridian. And I think one of the things that was most significant about this one is that, and I haven't really mentioned this so far, it's real easy when people hear that, well, as soon as you listen to your CDs or your streamed audio, you'll realize right off the bat, I've never heard anything like this before. And that's not just because the musicians are talented. You've never heard anything like this before because all the frequencies I'm explaining today, they live between the notes that you know. And that's mind-boggling, isn't it? Like it's the note that lives between G sharp and A, or, you know, E flat and E. It's the in-between. And what's interesting about that with any frequency is like if you're trying to listen to a standard radio and you have to actually manipulate the tuner to find the station. Once you've jockeyed that switch around and you get it right dead center, the music plays flawlessly and it's, you know, you can sing along with it. But if that FM dial gets off just to the left or right a little bit, there's suddenly more noise than there is signal. And that's exactly what happens with frequency. They're absolute. They have to be what they are to do what they do. Everything has a frequency. Everything has a resonant frequency. So when 639 was played, it was really a challenge for musicians because that was the first frequency that was outside of the 444.4 tuning. So as a musician, locating a note that doesn't exist in any literature or exist in any type of polyphony is a real fun thing to do. So if we didn't have the ability to actually find the frequency, we probably would have never actually been able to find the note. So at the end of the day, a beautiful color blue is indicative characteristic of the frequency 639, which technically, if it was a note, would be very close to E flat. So 639. What if I told you that there was a frequency that would actually elicit a great awakening or people having a greater understanding of something bigger than themselves? Well, there is, and it's 741 hertz. Salve pollute, which means would you clear the pollution from my soul? Wonderful way the Latins have of making this come alive. I think probably more than anything else, this one's a super immune builder in the body, or it really works in the thymus. It works on the heart, obviously, blood circulatory system, endocrine system. 741 clears infection, which I found very interesting. A lot of times, if people have infections that have been antibiotic resistant, this is the frequency for you, viral, bacterial, and fungal, and also the pancreas. As you'll find out later on, and you'll actually see her on camera, my mother was healed miraculously when I played this frequency over her body from pancreatic cancer, which is usually a death sentence. And as you'll see on film, she's very much alive and plays golf and walks 3 miles a day and full of life and takes no medications today. All because God has created frequency. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, I'll just put this little side note in. A lot of times people get really frustrated by things they don't understand because in our genetic makeup, the way God made us, we have that need to know mechanism somehow. We want to name everything. We want to bring everything into a place where we understand it. And if we can't understand it, then it must be demonic, weird, freaky, you know, from outer space. And what we don't understand is that when God said that life and death is in the power of the tongue vibrates and every word you speak is a frequency. So that same tongue that can create something fantastic can also bring destruction. And, you know, we've seen that time and time again, whether it be in the Bible or in people's personal life. When someone says, I hate you, it has an effect on you. And if they say, I love you, and it's legitimate, oh, it has an effect on you. So 741, amazing frequency, but what I found really even more amazing to me is that its characteristic is awakening of the soul, or coming alive again to be able to see things the way that they really are. So that's our frequency, 741. I'll also add your response may be a little different, but everyone that's listened to this one so far can't stop crying. I was used by God to put music to this, and I can't stop crying when I listen to it. So there's obviously something that's taking place inside of us that's very powerful when we listen to this frequency. And its color is one of my favorites, indigo. which is somewhere living between blue and purple, 741 hertz. And finally, in our journey through all of the frequencies that are within your project and hopefully within your ability to hear soon, 852 hertz, also known as labi rietum, which I find very significant, is from the lips of man to the ears of the Father. This one is known as a connection between God and man, and this was basically the one that really got the Gregorians in trouble back in the early days of the Roman Catholic Church, somewhere around 560 AD. And the problem is, and remains the problem, is pride is an ugly thing, whether it's within a religious structure, whether it's in a typical cultural structure. And there was such power that was taking place when the Gregorians would sing in the early days of the Roman Church that one particular pope was frustrated with the attention that they were getting and the lack of attention that actually the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and some of the priests were getting during this service. And it's that age-old thing, well, we really wish the worship team would have done more songs. And then the other, I really wish they would have spoke the word longer. And that weird tension, there was never supposed to be any tension between the worshiper and the laity, or the worshiper and the speaker, or it's all supposed to be this organic life expression of actually what Jesus wants. What a concept. That we would actually create the infrastructure for him to be worshiped and not us get what we want. But long story short, this particular frequency that actually has the ability to make a connection between God and man, because the actual frequency itself is indicative of Jesus. It's called the majestic on your project, or it's also known to return one to spiritual order, or to be able to see that I'm man and he's God, and I've learned to love the difference. Some special things about, of course, it's the color purple, or the purple, the color of royalty, which is wonderful. Some of the things that I can tell you right off the bat about this one is, like I said, they eventually removed all of these from their polyphony, changed the tuning all around 560 AD. It was the Pope that was, it's unbelievable to me. It's hard to even talk about sometimes, but that between a 400-year time, Pope Gregory, or Gregory the Great, and Emperor Constantine, between the two of them had pretty much neutered Christianity to the point where it was somewhat unrecognizable as the first century form from the second chapter of Acts. So a lot of times people say, what happened to Christianity, or what happened to spirituality? Or it doesn't take long for something to go from extremely potent to extremely, devoid of any power at all. And usually it has something to do with man. Just like gossip. Somebody could tell you a story and you can hear it from the horse's mouth, but by the time it gets around 20 or 30 people, the story's changed, quantum, and it was only a matter of hours. So you can imagine now that after 400 years, 500 years after Jesus' death, that the church is already in a downward spiral. And now there's jealousy between the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and the people that sing, that other Roman Catholics that actually are their worship team, for lack of a better expression, now they're getting too much attention. Well, the reason they're getting attention isn't because of them and a persona, it's them because when they sing these tones, miracles are happening. And nothing greater than when they would actually finish, like the hymn of John the Baptist, for example, and finish with 852 frequency, and suddenly people felt like there was a connection between them. But there was actually the possibility that Jesus could become their Lord, and that they could become his child. So after a very short period of time, actually only 10 years, I think, into Pope Gregory the Great's service, they had taken all of these frequencies out of music, changed the tuning of music, and 152 of the Gregorian's own solfeges suddenly were lost or conveniently misplaced. And nobody actually knows whatever happened to them. There's talk that perhaps they exist today in the Vatican archives, but nobody actually can prove that that's a fact. The point is, though, that somebody took something powerful out of music. And the purpose for us doing this project, more than anything else, is a reformation of what you don't get, what was ripped off from you, the music that lives in between the notes that we know. We've done this so you have a chance to hear something that no one in your generation has ever heard before. And we're not going to hold anything back. We're going to give you all of the information it takes to do this exactly the same way. How to tune your instruments, how to operate in this, for what reason. So we can bring back into the ability of people to hear frequencies that will spontaneously heal the physical body. Is that weird? No, it's not weird at all. It's just like a word. What is music? It's musing. What is musing? Musing is creative thought. Music is nothing more than creative sound. That's what music is. But what is music? Elementally, music is God. What is love? Oh, it's God. What is art? God. Science? God. He's the source. So there isn't anything weird or new age. In fact, it's as old as you can think. It's ancient information. The beauty of this is that now you're going to have the opportunity, whether you play an instrument or whether you just have the ability to be able to show your friends this music, to play something for someone that they have never heard in their lives, and many people for thousands of years have never heard. So yeah, part of this is we want to see people healed, and we want to see people liberated. We want to see people set free from themselves, but we want to see a reformation of music. And we want everything that God gave us to be intact in our generation.